the late 1960s, the Beatles and the Beach Boys are playing on the radio. You're seeing a lot of hippies and flowers in the air everywhere. But there's also some significant change that's taking place. People around the world, they are fighting for civil rights. They are fighting to stop the war in Vietnam, for women's, gay, and environmental rights. And a group of students in Berkeley, California, they're fighting for civil rights for disabled people. And one of their top requests is to just being able to cross the street independently and safely. Because every time that they want to cross the street, they're encountering a physical barrier. So thanks to this group of students and many other people around the United States who advocated and they fought for the first installation of just a simple ramp to cross the street, a lot of other people started benefiting from it. Not just people in a wheelchair, but bikers, skateboarders, people toting luggages, or parents with strollers. So here is what I would like to talk to you about, which is when you're designing for disabilities first, you're gonna solve for a few immediately, but you're gonna extend to many. And this is exactly what I'm gonna talk to you about, which is designing for accessibility, which ultimately means designing for everyone. My goal for today is to talk to you about what accessibility means, how to advocate for it, what does it mean to design for it, and why it's so important. But before, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my role at Facebook, which is to making sure that products like Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram are accessible for everyone. And my daily job is to produce a lot of guides, principles, requirements, and processes to make sure that product teams are integrating a more inclusive mindset in their work. Accessibility for a long time, for more than a decade, has been mainly an engineering-driven industry, or also an afterthought in our products. But that's what has to change. My goal is and our goal is to make sure that accessibility is integrated earlier in the process of design brief, and is not just in the hands of engineers, but overall in the hands of everyone. And when we talk about designing for everyone, we need to start thinking of integrating people in our process, integrating people that are having different abilities, which can be grouped in four main categories, which are vision and loss and blindness, hearing loss and deafness, motor dexterity, and cognitive impairments. Through our research, we've seen there are a lot of overlaps between the aging population, low-tech literacy, and learning disabilities, for example, dyslexia, which is the most common one. A lot of people, including myself at some point in time, we thought that people who are having disabilities were just a small set of the population. But actually, just that set is massive. It's 1 billion people. It's 15% of the population, as the World Health Organization states. And if we start thinking about this group of people a little bit more holistically, we start thinking about a group that is not self-identifying within this group. And so this number just doubles. And if we start thinking about friends and loved ones of these people, this circle expands again. And a bit more expansively, if we start thinking about people who are having temporary or situational disabilities, then this circle expands to cover the entire planet. But what do I mean with temporary or situational disabilities? Here, let's have a look to the definition. So the World Health Organization definition of disability is a mismatch between the human features of a body and the environment in which they live in. So here, this definition is really different than the perception, which is related to personal health condition. And so this definition puts the responsibility on us, designer, product teams, architects of our cities, to make sure that we are reducing these mismatch interactions. So here an example. For example, these three people, they're encountering similar accessibility barriers, for example, accessing a digital device, whether it's permanent, like the woman in a wheelchair, or temporary, like the boy with a broken arm, or situational, like a person carrying a grocery bag. So here is a reminder that at some point in our lifetime, we will need some accessibility needs. So also, designing for accessibility is proven to lead to innovation. Here, there are plenty of examples in history and in the design history of designing for accessibility first can fuel innovation. And here are just 3 examples. Audiobooks were first designed in the 30s for people with vision impairments. Then the OXO peeler, which you've probably seen or used in your kitchen, was designed for the founder wife arthritis. So using this product was really easier for her to peel a carrot or a potato. And this became an icon in the inclusive design books. And then captions were first designed and released to make television more accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing. So these are just a few examples on how these products and designing for accessibility made a dramatic impact into the people who are having different abilities, but they became extremely successful and useful for everyone. As final thought for setting the stage about the context when we talk about accessibility, accessibility is also an expensive business opportunity to ignore. Most of the times we talk about it as a moral act, which is a good thing to do, for sure, but we should start thinking more about it as a political act. Thinking about that for example, none of the 2020 presidential candidates' websites are fully accessible for disabled voters, and this is an example of the United States. So as more digital products, our companies are having such a huge and dramatic impact in society, we need to think about providing an equitable access to information, to services like not just voting, which is dramatically impacting our society, but entertainment or accessing an online restaurant or healthcare online or education and so on. So, but how can we get started? So let's get a little bit more practical. These are 5 chapters in our guidelines which we are following in our daily practice, which are talking about assistive technologies, colors and contrast, typography, motion, and sound. What I'm going to quickly deep dive into are the first 2 chapters. Most of probably some of the best practices that I'm going to talk about, they will probably resonate with you or will sound like 101 basic design. But that's exactly my goal, to make you think that designing for accessibility is just simply and ultimately good design. So talking about assistive technologies. Assistive technologies, they are softwares or hardware devices that are supporting people with different abilities to access your products. So first thing is the best practice to start with is to actually checking out and getting familiar with the accessibility settings in your own devices, web or native. And here you will find a variety of different enhancements like visibility, hearing, interaction enhancements that your users, people will change at the system level. An example, 20 to 25% of users of Facebook around the world, they're changing their font size on iOS and Android. So the question is how our UI, our experiences will change based on all of these different enhancements. Second is getting familiar with assistive technologies. Either is a keyboard navigation or a screen reader, switch device, braille keyboard. What we found out is that if we're going to start designing for screen readers, which are software that are reading out loud the UI for people who are having vision impairments, we are going to solve for most of the assistive technologies. And I'm going to deep dive into what it looks like to use and to experience a screen reader in a slide. But first, I want to share with you an example of how a colleague of mine, Matt, is using a braille screen on iOS to text a friend. And pretty fascinating. And the second example I want to share with you is a screen reader experience with actually broken or missing labels. Again, the labels are the announcements on what the screen reader will read out loud from your UI. So on the left, you're seeing a sighted, settings for sighted users, which you've probably already seen. And then on the right, you're gonna see settings for screen reader users. Now let's hear how this works.
/link, screen curtain off, basic, link, Fasarek, link, timeline digging, link, subscribe, link, block, link, /link, /link.
This was really frustrating, right? So there are a lot of broken and, let's say, missing labels. But now I want to share with you how positive, a good experience of a screen reader may sound like.
Facebook, heading, search, button, messenger, button, create post, button, live, photo, check-in, stories tray, add to store, Roby Bukeus, Bulam's story, Brett Lavala's story, on scene, Andrew Acton checked into alt Nanette be it, alert, choose an action, like, button.
So, as you could hear, all the UI elements were properly announced. But if you pay a little bit more attention, you probably heard a misleading information, which was live. Actually, it was live. So live was read as live. And there are a long list of different misleading information or abbreviation that can make a really different and dramatic experience for people using screen readers. So sometimes live can be read as live, or minutes can be meters, or streets can be saints. So here, I'm gonna make you aware that a slightly change in the number of pixels in our UI or the context setting while we are working with our engineers, it can make really a huge impact. So in this case, the best practice is to make sure that when you're designing for screen readers, to provide the context at the backend level when you're working with your engineers. But how do we really design for screen readers? So here, I want you to think to have a shift of your mindset. On a daily basis, we are, as designers, and researchers, we are used to design for a touch-based model, where you're tapping on the screen or using a cursor on the web. But then what I want to invite you to think is to shift this mindset and think about a cursor-based model, which we've seen before. The UI with a screen reader was moving across the screen in a linear consequential order. And so here an example, a trick is to think about when you are using, probably you use Netflix with your remote controller, sitting on the couch and changing or selecting a series or a movie. So that's exactly the trick when we are thinking of designing for screen readers. And an exercise to facilitate this task is, for example, to take your UI, whatever it is, and write down a list of the UI elements. In this way, you will think already and also be ready to test with your users the narrative where the screen reader will read out loud the UI. So this is the first chapter on how I hope you will start thinking of integrating in your design practice. The second chapter is about colors and contrast. So this is how people with color perception impairments see the world, or more specifically, actually, the home of this product. So color perception impairments are usually inherited, or they can, let's say, I would say, happen in your life for age-related diseases or for certain specific medications. A fun fact is actually that Facebook is blue because Mark Zuckerberg has red-green color perception impairment. Therefore, blue was the richest color he could perceive. So, but what can we do as a design community to solve this? The best practice is to design, to test your design with a grayscale. In this way, you will be able to have products that are color-proof. So in this example, you will probably see and perceive that the two elements that are underlined are not correspectively having the same meaning with the design with colors. So add a story or the circle around the profile picture, they're not having the same weight. So here is a best practice that we are trying to integrate in our daily job, is to test with grayscale and to make your design color-proof. Another best practice is to use multiple visual cues, whether they are more iconography or text, texture or descriptive text. So in this case, the color, the red color, is not enough for people with color impairments, but adding text, in this case, please enter your first and last name, could really improve the experience. Another practice is to be mindful of cultural differences. So here, there's an example of similar apps in the stock market, where in the Western world, the red color is indicating when something is going bad, when the market is going down. So we also see the minus in this case. Whether in the eastern part of the world, in China specifically, red indicates actually fortune, good luck. It's a positive color. So in this case, what we have to be aware is that we have a couple of choices, either to add, again, iconography, an icon, or a minus, or an arrow that is going up or down, depending on the color. Or the other option is to flip colors based on the market, which can be a little bit tricky for the scalability of this. So again, here's a really important part, to be really mindful of cultural differences. Last best practice about when we talk about colors and contrast is about respecting contrast ratio, which I'm sure this sounds really basic, 101 design, but this is the highest number of bugs and issues related to accessibility in all of our products in the world. So here the best practice is to follow the WCAG 2.0 AA ratio of at least 4.5 to 1 for normal text, and then 3 to 1 contrast ratio for smaller text and illustrations. All right, so here's a quick recap. I have to tell you, I don't really like checklists. So even though I'm telling you that this has been working pretty well, because it's giving us a guideline, a guide to actually make sure that we are reaching a basic minimum bar of accessibility of our products. So again, getting familiar with the accessibility settings of your products, getting familiar with assistive technologies, design for screen readers, which has been proven to work and improve the use of assistive technologies, and then test your design in grayscale for color perception impairments, and then use multiple visual cues and respect contrast ratio. This is just a really basic list, but again, if we make this right in our products, we're gonna solve most of, I would say, the majority of the bugs that are out there. Beyond the checklist, what I love to advocate is, of course, to test with actual people. That's with a variety of people with different impairments. And here I want to share with you a case when almost a year ago, we wanted to try and experiment a more immersive experience for stories for people with visual impairments. And so here is what we tested.
Facebook. Image may contain waterfall, beach, ocean, trees, and sky. Drag a finger over the image to explore it. Trees. Ocean. Waterfall. Trees. Sky.
So testing with different kind of people will really give you unique insights on how your product can really improve or change or, I would say, have a dramatic impact for people with different impairments. Also, in this case, after we tested, we had a really great feedback from this community, and we started working with the AI team, and we launched See Through Touch last F8. Beyond testing is what we've seen is really important is to have co-participatory design sessions. So really include all the stakeholders since the early stage in the process. And here is me actually with the same jacket on the right. So the question is also, what are the tools that you can use now to test and to measure your product's accessibility? Online, there are a few good accessibility open source resources like WebIM, which are gonna help you to understand the different kind of bugs or issues that needs to be solved, which again, they're not gonna solve for all of the issues, but at least to reach a minimum basic accessibility level. But what we do at Facebook is to make the invisible visible. With accessibility team, we developed a tool that actually is scanning our UI and then placing kind of red blocks on top of accessibility or UI quality violations. And these kind of violations can be, again, about broken or missing links, labels, as we've seen earlier, or can be about low contrast ratio, or they can be about small tap targets, and so on. Our goal is to, and what we believe is that accessibility is everyone's responsibility. It's not just in the hands of engineers, designers, but it's in the hands of researchers, content strategists, PMs, directors. And our goal is to make accessibility everyone's responsibility. So as a recap, accessible design is a human right, as the UN stated. It's an innovation tool. It's a business opportunity, pretty proven, and it's just simply and ultimately good design. My invitation to you is to think again about the curb cut that I showed you earlier, and think of your products, the companies you're working with, and think if someone with low vision or hard of hearing or motor dexterity or cognitive impairments is using your products, what would you change now? Advocating for accessibility, it could be a slow process, and will probably not be an easy thing to prioritize with all the amount of things you have to do with your colleagues, clients, stakeholders. But it's fine, because it's a cultural mindset, it's a cultural shift that just takes time. The good news is that designers and everybody in our community, we all care about this. And soon enough, your company, your colleagues, your stakeholders, they will make sure that accessibility is going to be your company priority. You just need to trust in the process. To conclude, good design enables and bad design disables. So it's on all of us, it's our responsibility to make sure that all of the products we are putting out, either is an entertainment tool, is voting, or is shopping, they need to be accessible to allow everyone to access to the online power of a community. Thank you.